So my name is Heather White. I'm a former Montessori classroom teacher, administrator, and in-home caregiver with more than 15 years of experience in the world of education, specifically in Montessori. I now work as an educational coach and consultant. I'm an instructional guide amongst many other responsibilities for adult learners who are working to receive their certification through the Center for Guided Montessori Studies. And I'm also a blog writer and content creator for several organizations, including the American Montessori Society, Miru's Toys, and Guide and Grow. I hold certifications from the American Montessori Society at the 3 to 6 and 6 to 9 age groups. And I also have experience working with the 0 to 3 and 9 to 12 age groups as well. I have a master's in education with a concentration in Montessori studies and an education specialist degree in school psychology. And I am also a nationally certified school psychologist. So during our time together today, we're going to look at a variety of topics, starting with kind of diving into discussing 3 different types of parenting or caregiving styles. These are often also the styles that you see educators use as well. We're then going to look at the goals of discipline, some common adult misbehaviors that often trigger the misbehaviors we see in children, and then we'll look at some reasons why children misbehave. Finally, we're going to explore some positive redirection tools, some ways that we can address some of those challenging behaviors, including ways to encourage and honor the child, and also tips for facilitating their responsibility. So these are those 3 parenting or caregiving styles that I was discussing just a moment ago. Most parents, caregivers, let's just say adults in general, because we were discussing educators as well, will use one of these styles or perhaps a blend of 2 or maybe even all 3. These parenting and caregiving styles are known as autocratic or sometimes referred to as authoritarian. The second is permissive, and the third is called democratic. Autocratic parents view children in situations as bad or wrong. They use force as a discipline tool in order to manipulate a child to do the things that they would like them to do. This force doesn't necessarily just mean physical force. It can also mean things like guilt, threats, grounding, spanking, sarcasm, criticism, humiliation, bribes. All of these things are considered a type of force. The second parenting style there is called permissive parenting. And this is a style of parenting that makes the child feel like the adult doesn't care, even if we do. And finally, the third style mentioned there is democratic parenting. And this type of parenting or caregiving is based on the use of what's called authentic power. These types of caregivers do not judge a child as wrong or bad, but instead focus on uniting or bonding with the child. They use this authentic power where they seek to understand rather than to judge the child, to love them unconditionally, to build the child's positive self-concept, and to make sure that everyone wins. So they're focused on making sure that themselves and the child both feel positive and happy with the outcome of the caregiving. So with that in mind, thinking about those 3 parenting styles, regardless of which one you might fall in or an educator might fall in, the goals of discipline remain the same. We're all looking for the same outcome. When we discipline a child, the goal that we're really seeking is to teach that child to be self-responsible and to act in ways that will get positive results, whether an authority figure is there or not. We really want discipline to increase a child's awareness of their choices so that they are able to make those choices independently and to do what's right, to be able to distinguish right from wrong and to make good choices and to do what's right, even when someone isn't watching, even when they know they're able to have that capability to choose on their own and no one is going to reprimand them or be there to tell them that they made the wrong choice. We want them really to internalize these skills that we're trying to pass along to them. That is the ultimate goal of discipline, regardless of which of those three parenting or caregiving styles adults use. So perhaps something that is most often overlooked is how our behavior as an adult might trigger some of these misbehaviors that we're seeing in children. And I think this is a really good place to start when you're on this journey of trying to learn and discover how to positively redirect children's behavior, because we often find it most challenging to look inward and to change things about ourselves, but we can evoke the most change when we do so. So some common adult misbehaviors that might trigger those frustrating or challenging misbehaviors in children are a lot of methods that discourage the child. Things like humiliation, criticism, overusing phrases like no and don't, or kind of the opposite of that, overprotecting the child, saving them from situations, rescuing them, right? Overdoing, doing things for them. And also the disingenuous use of encouragement. So even if you're encouraging a child, if you're really just saying it for lip service and you don't mean what you're saying, and the child can tell that, that's also something that can trigger a child's misbehavior. Similarly, a parent or a caregiver's use of what's known as feeling stoppers can also trigger a child's misbehavior. Feeling stoppers are actions that we take as adults that cause children to stop expressing how they feel in order to find protection or seek protection for themselves. Examples of feeling stoppers are very similar to what we just looked at, those common adult misbehaviors. They're things like scolding the child, solving their problems for them, lecturing them, giving them advice, being sarcastic, minimizing their problems, pitying them, like we said, rescuing or saving them, and helping too much. So even things that you might think have a positive impact, right? Like helping the child or rescuing them, saving them from a situation, can actually cause them to stop expressing how they're feeling because that's not what they're looking for. So it's important to figure out what the child's needs are so that we ensure that we're meeting their needs and not causing some of these feeling stoppers to occur. So with that being said, we need to talk about why children misbehave, right? Like I was just saying, we need to figure out what their need is. Usually children demonstrate challenging behavior because they're trying to fulfill an unmet need. They're communicating non-verbally with us about what their needs are. It's something that they're not able to say with their words, or maybe that they choose not to say with their words, depending on the child's age. Maybe they're not comfortable using their words, but they're using their behavior to communicate with us about what they need and what needs they have that are not being met. As the adult, then, it's our job to determine what the child needs. We have to try to figure out what their mistaken goal is. There are 4 different types of mistaken goals, which are attention, power, revenge, and avoidance. And we're going to take a look at those here on the next slide. So this is called the mistaken goal chart. This comes from the Positive Discipline Program, which was developed by Jane Nelson. And the way that you use this chart is to identify how you feel as the adult so that you can determine what the goal of a child's behavior is, and then find more empowering ways of meeting their needs. So for instance, if we look in that first column, and in fact, there is another version of this goal chart where the second column here that says how the parent or teacher feels, that column is actually first. And the reason for that is because that's where we start. Just like I was saying, right, and considering our own behavior and our own misbehavior, if you will, and how that might trigger a child, the same idea is true here. We need to look inward first and consider how we're feeling because that is often the best clue towards what a child's unmet needs are and how we can respond and in a more empowering way. So let's say that you're feeling annoyed, irritated, worried, or maybe even guilty. The goal of the child's behavior then is likely, here in column 1, undue attention. And in order to meet this need, we can set up here in the 8th column, you can set up established routines so that the child knows what to expect and when to expect it, plan some special time together, and then also redirect them by involving them in useful tasks. And this way, they're getting that attention that they're seeking, but in positive ways, so that there's no longer a need for these negative behaviors, if you will, to arise, which is how they were getting your attention previously. So you've fulfilled their need so that misbehavior is no longer necessary. They no longer need to engage in that behavior to have their needs met. I won't go through each of these here. You will get a copy of the slide deck, so you can take a look yourself. And you can also find these resources online. There are multiple versions of this chart. There's a version for children 0 to 3 specifically. There's a version for children who are neurodivergent, who have exceptionalities. But again, they all focus on considering how you're feeling and identifying then what the child's mistaken goal is. And the other columns that are here in the middle really help you confirm that that is the correct mistaken goal. Because so often what happens is adults say, well, I feel annoyed, but I also feel angry. And so it's about really honing in on what the primary feeling you have is. So if you find, instead of reminding the child and coaxing them, doing things for them, that instead you're fighting with them, giving in, or thinking you can't get away with that, or I'm going to make you do this, then the goal is likely misguided power rather than undue attention. So these columns here in the middle really help ensure that you found the correct mistaken goal so that the empowering responses that you start using will be most effective. So now let's look at how we can really promote this positive behavior. We've identified what the child's unmet need is, and what else can we do to promote positive behavior? So one of the first things is to encourage a child's feelings. It's the direct opposite of those feeling stoppers that we talked about previously. Feeling encouragers are ways that you can communicate with a child that really invite them to express their feelings. And in fact, these tips and tools can be used with anyone. You can use it with a coworker, with a partner, with a family member. Because these are universal ways that you can make someone else feel comfortable enough to share how they're feeling with you. Some of those strategies are listening intently, affirming the person's feelings, asking them questions to ensure that you understand, exploring with curiosity what they're saying to you and how they're feeling, showing empathy, sharing a similar experience if appropriate. And in doing so, the other person, and in these situations, the child, really starts to feel acknowledged and validated, understood, accepted, and that helps them to work through their emotions. They're able to express how they're feeling and kind of get it off their chest, which then allows them to work through those feelings and to start to be able to meet their needs on their own, right? If we go back to the goal of discipline, we want children to be able to be capable and confident to work through things and to solve their problems and to do what's right. And these feeling encouragers is the first way to make them feel safe enough to do so on their own. Another important aspect of promoting positive behavior is offering unconditional love. The core tenet, if you will, of unconditional love is having belief in a child and their abilities, letting them know that you believe that they're capable. Our beliefs about children really do shape how we respond to them. And sometimes we might not even be aware of the beliefs that we have. So to find out if your beliefs about a child are positive or negative, it can be really helpful to look at the labels that you apply to a child. Because if we can change the label that we're using, we can then change our expectations, and that will in turn lead to positive behavioral responses in the child. Some common negative labels that people often use are the terrible twos, shy. Maybe you say, oh my goodness, he is so hyper. Forgetful is another one. Brat is used quite a lot for children. And sometimes these labels might also be what we would consider positive. Maybe it's something like saying, oh my goodness, she is so pretty, or he is a genius. Even though these are positive labels, they still limit a child's potential because of the mental associations with that term. We're literally boxing the child in and telling them by using these labels that this is who they are. This is what's expected of them. And they live up, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They live up to those expectations. So we really want to try to remove these labels so that we're able to change our expectations, which in turn lead to positive responses in the child's behavior as well. Another really wonderful opportunity to promote positive behavior is the use of gems. Dorothy Briggs, who's the author of Child's Self-Esteem is the name of the book, describes what she refers to as gems or genuine encounter moments. And these are opportunities for focused attention. Focused attention is really where you're getting down on the child's level, you're giving them your full attention, you're not engaged in any other task, you're absolutely present in the moment, and so are they. Interestingly, the National Family Institute reports that the average child here in America gets only 12 and a half minutes each day in communication with their parents. So throughout 24 hours, only 12 and a half minutes every day that a child is communicating with their parents on average. And of that time, 8.5 minutes are spent being corrected, criticized, and in arguments. So that leaves only 4 minutes out of 24 hours, only 4 minutes every day that positive interactions are taking place between a parent and a child. So it's really important to maximize that time, but also to try to make time for more of those encounters. And the way that you can do that is by listening attentively to a child. Like I said, get down on their level, give them 100% of your attention. In this way, the child starts to feel acknowledged, valuable, cared for, important. And when they get that kind of attention, then they have a little need to misbehave in order to get attention. So go back to that mistaken goal chart, right? If a child's need is unmet need or mistaken goal is undue attention, and they're engaging in these misbehaviors in order to seek your attention, even if it's negative, if you're able to increase the time that you spend with them in these gyms and these genuine encounter moments, that need for undue attention disappears. And so that misbehavior also disappears. Another really great strategy for encouraging positive behavior or redirecting children's behavior is to honor their intentions. Often, children misbehave unconsciously. When we speak to them about their behavior, it's important that we do so in a loving way and with a loving tone that allows them to look at their behavior and decide what to do about it. So often we ask children, why did you do that? And the answer very well may be that they don't know. And that's frustrating for us as the adult because we know why we do things, but for a child, especially who is still developing their impulse control, kind of going a little bit more into neuropsychology here, your frontal lobe, the front part of your brain that's involved in executive functions, things like impulse control, is not fully developed until your mid-20s. So consider then you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or even a 10-year-old child that you are frustrated with, who has demonstrated behavior that is challenging, and you ask them, why did you do that? Especially for a 10-year-old, you would think as an adult that they would be able to tell you why. And unfortunately, that's not the case, because sometimes they really just don't know. They just acted on impulse and it was very unconscious. Going back to that mistake and goal chart, the reason these behaviors exist is because there's an underlying unmet need. And a child of 4, 6, 10, 15 even may not be able to figure out, without our assistance in helping them encourage their feelings and honoring their intentions, having these opportunities for gems. Without those times, they might not be able to look inward and really try to understand what their need is that triggered that behavior. So it's really important to let our children know that they're accepted and that we know that they were likely doing something with good intention. We want to try to use words when we're speaking with them about their behavior that show that we understand what their true intention likely was. For example, if you had a child who was continuously pestering your family dog, you might say something like, "You're bothering the dog. I know that's not what you intend, because you're normally so loving to him. Is there something you want to talk about?" The opposite of that, and which I think comes much more naturally, right? It's our instinct as an adult, is to say, "Stop bothering the dog." Um, and although the child's behavior may stop because we've asked them to, their behavior is going to continue, and it's going to come through in some other situation, because that underlying unmet need is still there. There's something internal that they haven't yet resolved. In that first situation, we let them know what was inappropriate about their behavior, what we were not okay with. We set that limit, right? We let them know that it was not okay to bother the dog. And we invited them to work with us to figure out what it was that was bothering them, which then in turn not just stops the behavior of bothering the dog, but also stops that negative or negative behavior or misbehavior from occurring in a different circumstance as well, because we're meeting that underlying need. With all of that being said, mistakes happen. We're all human. They're a fact of life. Even as adults, we make mistakes all of the time, and children will make mistakes as well. Even when we're using all of these strategies, they will still make mistakes. They will still misbehave, if we want to, keep using that term. And so it's important that we take advantage of these mistakes and really use them as teachable moments. Use them as a source of encouragement. So when a child makes a mistake, instead of scolding them, we can try to use one of these 5 strategies that minimize the mistake and focus instead on offering encouragement for the child. The first is emphasizing what the child could do differently next time and teaching them a new skill if necessary. So let's just give a very simple example. Let's say a child was carrying a jug and they were only carrying it with one hand and it was heavy, and they drop the jug, it's glass, and it breaks and water goes everywhere. Instead of focusing on what they did wrong, you can just point it out very matter-of-factly. "I noticed you were carrying the jug with one hand. Next time, if you carry it with 2 hands, it might be more supported and won't fall." And then you can model what that looks like for them. Get a new glass jug, fill it with water, and model carrying it for them so that they see, and let them practice, right? You're teaching them a new skill. The second strategy is separating the deed from the doer. Reassure the child that you love them, but their misbehavior is not accepted. It's not that they're not accepted or unwanted, it's that the behavior that they engaged in is not accepted and unwanted. Number 3 is giving the child another chance. This lets them know that you have faith in them and their ability to improve. You believe in them and their ability to make a different decision in the future. That's going to lead to that sense of confidence and capability, which, going all the way back to the beginning of the presentation when we talked about the goal of discipline, is that children internalize these things and make good choices even when someone else isn't around, even when there's not an authority figure present to tell them that they did something wrong. So if we show faith in the child and let them know that they're capable, then in the future, they have this confidence in themselves to make the right choice, even when someone isn't present. Number 4, show them what to do rather than telling them. It's really difficult for children, especially very young children, to watch our actions and hear our words. In fact, children before the age of 6 are in the sensitive period for language. So they're so interested in language that they're going to listen to what you're saying rather than watching what you're doing. And in the what Dr. Montessori described as the absorbent mind, where they just soak in everything around them, if they're focusing on what we're saying and they don't necessarily fully understand language yet, they're not going to get a full picture of what the expectation is. Where with that jug situation, right? Instead of telling them what we're doing and talking while we're doing it, if we just say, let me show you, and then without any words at all, almost exaggerated really how slow and carefully you're carrying this jug, we model for them without speaking, it's going to make a much stronger impression for them. They'll remember that a lot more when they go to get that jug out to serve themselves a drink of water in the future. And finally, strategy number 5 is asking questions that encourage the child to figure things out on their own. Remember, we want them to be capable and confident to be able to problem solve. And so in a loving tone, you might ask them, well, what did you learn from that situation? What might you do differently next time? What would happen if, and give them a different scenario. Questions like these really guide children towards solutions and build that sense of self-reliance. So going back to that jug scenario, we've used the example here a few times. You might say, well, what did you learn when you dropped the jug on the floor and water whenever? What did you learn? Or what would you do differently next time? And they might even be able to tell you, oh, I would hold it with 2 hands instead of just one, before you step in and tell them how to do something differently in the future. They might be able to figure it out on their own. With that being said, as adults, it's really hard not to jump in and rescue the child like we talked about. Do things for them. We often do things for children because we know we can do them more quickly and more efficiently. However, when we do that, we're really robbing them of those learning opportunities. So flashback to the last slide, that moment when the child, spills the water and drops the jug and it breaks, we're robbing the child of those really powerful learning opportunities. The chance to learn through that experience and in turn to build that sense of self-confidence and capability. When we act as if a child can't handle a situation or we don't believe they are capable of handling a situation, they become reliant upon us. Where in turn, if we show them what we believe that they're capable and that they can handle a situation on their own, they start to feel much more self-confident. They feel encouraged to do things beyond what they even think is possible. So it's really important to try to provide children with opportunities to try new things and to give them responsibilities that let them know that you think they're capable, because this is where they're really going to start to develop that internal sense of self-concept that is so important for redirecting their behavior. These are some common tasks that children of different ages are capable of doing that will really help them learn that sense of responsibility. Toddler age children up to about the age of 3 years can do things like helping bring in the mail, getting their own snack, picking up their toys, gathering supplies for diaper change, washing off fruits and vegetables, watering plants. The preschool age child, so about 3 or 4 to 6 years old, can do things like folding their clothes, helping with planting and tending to a garden, sweeping the floor, raking leaves, preparing their lunch, and also walking pets if you have one. And finally, elementary age children. So let's say, 6 to 10, 7 to 12 years old, somewhere in there, they can do things like washing a car, fixing a small meal for themselves or the family, changing their bedding, even getting themselves up independently in the morning. And allowing children, encouraging children to do these things, again, lets them know that you think they're capable and instills that sense of self-confidence that is necessary for promoting positive behavior. Ultimately, redirecting children's behavior really is a way of life. It's focused on creating these win-win situations. Remember, we talked about that being where the parent feels happy with a situation and feels like, things are the way that they want it, and the child feels the same. And these win-win situations are respectful, cooperative, and loving for the adult and for the child. I wanted to close with a quote from Catherine J. Cavoles. So Catherine J. Cavoles wrote a book that much of this presentation is based on called Redirecting Children's Behavior. It's by the same title. And Catherine reminds us of the importance of positive redirection. In her book, she says, as we create more peace and harmony within families, our society will become more cooperative and experience less violence and isolation. Together, we can make a difference for all children and for our world. And I really felt like that was so powerful and really speaks to the importance of positive discipline and redirecting children's behavior in positive ways, because when we make these small changes with a single child or with a group of children, either within our own family or within our own classroom family as educators, that impact has the ability to continue to grow and spread on a global scale, right? Those small changes really build, and we have the power, we possess the capability of really affecting these incredible changes in our society at large as well. If you're interested in learning more about redirecting children's behavior, I do encourage you to check out that book by the same title by Catherine J. Cavoles. The image is shown here. This is an updated cover. There is an older version that's very similar as well. The foreword is just a little different. I also highly recommend Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson. So this is the original version, which is a guide to helping children with self-discipline, responsibility, cooperation, and problem solving, which is really wonderful for parents and caregivers and educators. Like I said, there are many different versions, and this is where that mistaken goal chart comes from. Each book has that mistaken goal chart in it as well. But if you work with a particular population of children, or you have a child of a specific age, there are books for very specific age groups. There's books specific for the classroom. There's even one for the Montessori classroom in particular, which is one of my favorites. There's one for neurodivergent children. So just a wealth of information provided in these Positive Discipline books by Jane Nelson. And finally, another really great read on this topic is No Drama Discipline, which is by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. And this is really looks at the way that the brain is involved in affecting these positive discipline techniques. And so that's a really fascinating kind of neuropsychology and neurobiology take on redirecting children's behavior in positive ways. Also a fantastic resource. So before I open it up to final questions, I know we have about 20 minutes. I did try to leave quite a bit of time since we didn't stop in the middle of the presentation. I did want to just say thank you so much for being here and share my contact information with you all. So here I have my email address. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email. My LinkedIn profile is also there if you have one and want to connect with me. My website is listed, and on my website and on my social media accounts, which my handle is at Montessori.matters. This is my logo up here at the top, so you know you found the right place. I would love if you all followed along on those social media outlets. I share a lot of education, parenting, caregiving, and Montessori content that hopefully you all would find really helpful. So it would be wonderful if you followed along. I do see we have some questions, so I think we will open that up.
Thank you very much for your brilliant presentation, Ms. White, on this topic of redirecting children's behavior. Pretty much like you concluded earlier, this process implies a win-win situation, a context where both the children and we, the parents or the caregivers, can take full advantage of the continuum of which we are both part. I believe that nothing could have been articulated with such an impactful manner, to the extent that we do all understand everything that you've done, the theories behind that philosophy, the practicum data that you provided, the clear examples that were also part of the presentation, plus your solid supporting references. You have covered it all. Ms. Heather White, you are an authentic teacher. Atlantic International University is really pleased to have you among us for this type of presentation. Pretty much like you said, let's go to the first question, Ms. Heather, with Victor Agini. Victor.
Okay, thank you, sir, Doc, and thank you, presenter. It's actually a very wonderful presentation. It's a thought-provocative one. I want to ask about the parenting styles. I was expecting maybe you have given us the advantages and disadvantages of the three parenting styles. That is the autocratic, permissive, and the third one I've just forgotten. I wanted to find out if there's any best style that you could suggest to us.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's go back to that slide, just so, excuse me for just a minute for flipping through very quickly, but just so we have it here to take a look at. So yes, so great question. So there, what would be preferred, or what's going to really encourage those win-win situations would really be that democratic parenting style. This is also known as a, I want to go back, the autocratic, right? Another word that you might be more familiar with is authoritarian, and the democratic is also known as authoritative. I think it's a little easier to understand autocratic and democratic because there's a bigger discrepancy between authoritative and authoritarian sound so similar that they often get confused. So the democratic parenting creates a really close and nurturing bond between the child and the caregiver. Each person has clearly defined roles. There's frequent communication. You're really engaging in those gem moments back and forth. There's clear limits that have been set. The child knows what is expected of them. There's clear guidelines, right, for their appropriate behavior. The discipline techniques involved in democratic parenting really focus on so many of the strategies that we just discussed in the presentation. So positive discipline, right, or positively redirecting children's behavior would most commonly fall under this democratic style of parenting or caregiving. That's when we are focusing on children learning through experience. We're focusing on using their mistakes as teachable moments and learning opportunities. The child is frequently involved in setting limits and boundaries and distinguishing and determining what their responsibilities are. It's that win-win, it's that collaborative situation. The democratic parenting, which, like I said, is also known as authoritative parenting or caregiving, really focuses on supporting children so that they become that confident, capable, well-adjusted, self-reliant, responsible adults. So we think about the goal of discipline, right? The democratic parenting or caregiving is really the method that most effectively leads to that result. It's typically considered to be the ideal parenting or caregiving style. Children who have been cared for in this way have higher self-esteem. They're more independent, they're more responsible, they have higher self-control. But like I said, sometimes parents and caregivers use a blend of 2 or even more parenting styles. So if we're going back and we look at that autocratic parenting, which is also known as authoritarian, this is really a situation where when mistakes occur, the rules are enforced by some kind of punishment. So if we're thinking about those feeling stoppers, a lot of feeling stoppers might be in play with autocratic parenting. Children from autocratic parents or caregivers are often really well behaved because they know what the expectations are, and there's usually been some kind of stern or strict discipline or consequences for stepping out of the line. So they do typically exhibit very positive behaviors. However, they're doing so because they know what the consequence is, not because they've internalized and are able to make positive choices on their own. It's more, I don't want to get in trouble versus I want to do the right thing, right? And like we were talking about, we want children to do the right thing even when no one is watching. And the parents or the children of autocratic parents or caregivers can also start to show some rebellious tendencies as they get older because they're kind of bucking the system, if you will, right? They get frustrated about all of these punishments and discipline strategies that were used and having to stay within the lines for so many years. And so they start to rebel. And as adults, the children that were raised in this way might have trouble managing their anger, or that because they have trouble with that self-control. It wasn't a skill that they learned. Finally, for that permissive style, this does often create a warm and nurturing bond between the parent and the child, but there's little expectations or limits set for the child. So the role of adult and child kind of blurs, those lines kind of blur and aren't well defined. Permissive caregivers are usually really responsive to a child's needs. So they meet the child's needs really quickly and communicate with them quite a lot. They give them a lot of choice, but there's little structure or guidance. So that order that children need is not always present with the permissive parenting or caregiving style. And so the children lack those boundaries that are necessary for positive discipline and the structure that's necessary to really become well-adjusted. And that's often where some of the behavioral challenges of children who are raised with a permissive parenting or caregiving style come from, is because the children might start to develop unhealthy habits of, being on a screen too often, or eating foods that aren't nutritious. Maybe they have bad sleep habits because there aren't any boundaries put into place or limits of what those situations should look like. And so over time, then that can lead to negative behavior arising. Hopefully that answers your question and was helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Before we go to Namuli, Bernadette, who's been having him up for a little while, there is a question that popped up on the chat line, Ms. Heather. I do not quite get it, but certainly you would have a better hint for Idris from Cameroon, who asked, what about children who fail to honor their teachers? What might be the cause? I don't know what your stand on is on this question, Ms. Heather.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the mistaken goal chart because I think this is a really, really powerful tool and helpful tool for considering all of children's behavior. So what I would encourage you to do, if you're the one in that situation, or maybe you're the parent, maybe you can provide this tool to the educator and really ask the adults in the situation to consider how they feel, right? Because that's where we're going to try to start the process of determining what the child's need is that is not being met, what their mistaken goal is, so that we can then change our behavior, change our responses to empower the child in a positive way. So let's say in that situation where a child is not honoring a teacher, that the teacher is feeling these things. They're feeling angry. They're feeling challenged. They're feeling threatened and maybe even defeated. And some of the strategies that they're using or the reactions that they find themselves using are that they're fighting with the child. They're giving in and they just give the child what they want because they're tired of this battle back and forth. They often find themselves thinking, you can't get away with that, or I'm going to make you do this. And the teacher really wants to be right, right? There's a clear sense that I want to be right and you're going to be wrong. In that situation, it's likely that the child's goal is misguided power. They're seeking power, and by engaging with them in this way, by fighting with them, by telling, thinking you can't get away with this or I'll make you, the adult is engaging in a power struggle with them. And so it's intensifying the behavior. Whether we intend to or not, we're really encouraging this negative behavior to continue because now we are both trying to win. And so we're at odds and we're just going to keep battling back and forth. But what the child is really feeling or needing underlying is this belief that they only belong if they're in control. And so they're going to make sure that no one makes them do something. No one is the boss of them. Instead, what we want to do is give them opportunities to help. We want to give them choices. We want to let them know that we can't make them do anything. And we don't want to fight with them. We want to be firm and kind. We can let routines be the boss instead of us. So we eliminate that power struggle and we get help from them in setting these limits so that we're both in control. Remember, we're going back to that win-win strategy. So they're helping us brainstorm more positive behaviors. They're helping us brainstorm how we can act differently in a situation in the future. So like I said, that might not be that particular child's misguided belief or mistaken goal, but what you really should do is focus on how you're feeling as the adult and then use that information to use the rest of the chart to figure out how you might change your behavior to empower the child and to encourage more positive behavior on their behalf as well.
Very, very clear. As promised, Nabuli, Bernadette, this is your turn right now for your question, please. Bernadette, Namuli. Please make sure your microphone is on. I have unmuted you on my end, and there is no sound still from you. I do realize that you are trying, but we will get back to you, Bernadette, as we are now making the floor open for Collins, Anderson Collins. Collins. Reminding you, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the process of wrapping up that wonderful presentation by Miss Heather White on the topic of redirecting children's behavior. We have three of you with your hands up. I'm asking you to ensure that your microphone is on. Normally, apparently you are ready to go. No, your microphone, you are unmuted, Bernadette, but your microphone for some reason unknown to us, there is no sound on your end. Let's try Collins Anderson again. Apparently, okay.
Hello, are you getting me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you, doctor. My question is that, I thank you, the presenter, but my question is that he said, use mistake to encourage the child. To use a mistake to encourage the child, is it a good way to bring up the child? Because today, if I thought we cannot set or we cannot correct our children when they do something or do any mistake and tell them that what you do is not right, they will grow up with that attitude and that habit. My question is that to use a mistake to encourage the child, is it a good way to bring up a child?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. And I think the important thing to understand about using mistakes as encouragers is that you are doing so in a way that sets the limit, reestablishes the limit, and uses the mistake as an encourager. So for instance, let's say, I used the example of a child that was being too rough with a family pet. So what you want to do in that situation is try to acknowledge and validate how the child might be feeling or what you're seeing, their behavior. Set a limit, let them know what the expected behavior is. And if possible, offer them a choice. So you can say something like, I noticed that you're being really rough with the dog. We may not use rough hands with our family pets, or we may not use rough hands in our household. Whatever the expectation is, whatever the limit is that you've set, you reestablish that. So you let them know what you see or affirmed their feelings if that's appropriate in the situation. You set the limit, you reestablish the limit, and when it's appropriate, you offer them a choice. Or remember, in that feeling encouragers, we talked about giving them the opportunity to, say, is there something that you want to talk about? Maybe they're engaging in that behavior because they're frustrated about something. So we're inviting them to talk about how they're feeling. So it's not just accepting the misbehavior and encouraging it to happen again in the future. Instead, what we're doing is using the misbehavior as a way to connect with the child, to reestablish those limits, to be firm but kind. This is not accepted, and I still love you, right? So we're able to let them know we're separating the deed from the doer. We're setting those limits, we're setting those boundaries, we're helping them understand how to do things differently in the future so that the behavior doesn't happen again. So we're not encouraging the behavior, we're encouraging the child so that the behavior is actually discouraged in the future. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit, Collins.